Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street Woodbrook, Metropolitan Bookshop Ariapita Avenue Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
WESN.
Hello everyone, this is Andy Johnson welcoming you to this edition of 10 questions in the aftermath of Carnival 2024. This is a headline on a press release issued on February 6, 2024. Mayaro MP Rushton Pare engages in constructive talks with U.S. Ambassador Candice Bond. Mayaro Member of Parliament Rushton Pare had the distinct honor and privilege of hosting the distinguished U.S. Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago Candice Bond at his office in Mayaro. This historic visit marks the first time a U.S. ambassador has made an official visit to the Mayaro-Rio Claro area. The meeting was characterized by fruitful discussions centered around critical energy and security issues affecting the region. During the meeting, Ambassador Bond and MP Pare delved into comprehensive strategies to combat and eliminate scourges such as narco-trafficking and human trafficking. Both parties share a resolute commitment to eradicating these challenges that profoundly impact the well-being of local communities. Additionally, discussions revolved around exploring enhanced collaboration between the U.S. and Mayaro. In addition to the discussions at Mr. Pare's office, Ambassador Bond held productive meetings at the Mayaro-Rio Claro Regional Corporation, reinforcing the commitment to engaging with local authorities. The ambassador also participated in a function at the Rio Claro East Secondary School, where she took part in a special tree planting ceremony showcasing her dedication to understanding and contributing to the educational landscape of the community. The visit underscores ongoing efforts to fortify diplomatic ties, promote regional security, and explore collaborative opportunities for economic development. MP Pare is optimistic about the potential for sustained cooperation in the future, believing that such engagements pave the way for a brighter and more secure future for Mayaro. MP Rushton Pare is our guest on this edition of the program. Good to see you, sir. Good to have you.
Hi, good morning, Andy, and thank you for having me on your program this morning.
All right, so let's start at the top, as it were. Give us a sense of the background to this visit and what was discussed in the various areas of interest that the ambassador seems to have in Mayaro.
Sure. Well, let me start by speaking about how the ambassador ended up in Mayaro.
Yes.
We have had, in terms of the Mayaro constituency, we've had a very long and fruitful relationship with the U.S. Embassy over the 8 years that I have been MP. If I were just to take you back to some of the things that we've partnered with in the past.
By all means.
So, for instance, in 2016, we engaged the U.S. Embassy to assist us with a program within our school system with teachers and principals, where we delved with the issues around extremism and how do you combat violence in schools and so on. That was very well attended. We had participation from teachers, principals, students, local government officials, and so on. Over that period as well, we've had the Delaware National Guard. They too would have participated in several programs in the constituency, anchoring around disaster management, disaster response. We did have some military-led training for our police officers, Coast Guard, fire officers within the Mayaro constituency in dealing with various aspects of crime, crowd control, and so on. We have done several programs with health clinics, with health a provision of support for me during the COVID-19. As you would remember, I led a local COVID-19 task force here in Mayaro, yes. And the U.S. Embassy participated very, very well in that. Now, outside of what the embassy would have done, this MP have had a very good relationship, interpersonal relationship with the U.S. Embassy over the years as well. As far back as 2016, I was part of the IVLP program, leadership program, that took me to Washington, New York, where we met with officials from the Pentagon, FBI, State Department, and so on. We visited the Maryland Disaster Management Center, where we got a better understanding of how disasters, large-scale disasters, are managed and so on. Now, after that, I was also selected by the embassy to attend a 1-month training at the Marshall Center in Germany, where the program was based on combating transnational organized crime. I was the only parliamentarian in a group of over 100 senior police officers from Interpol, Europol, several policing agencies throughout Europe, and also included there were TTPS officers on that program as well. That was followed up by a trip to Washington, where I would have met with several persons in the State Department, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, which is the department that issues the licenses and so on right now, in terms of the sanctions against Venezuela. And most recently in 2021, I was also selected to join a program, a 7-day program, at the William J. Perry Center in Washington, where we delved on issue of Caribbean security and cybercrime. So when you take all of that into context in terms of the officer's relationship with the U.S. Embassy, the MP's relationship with the U.S. Embassy, there's very little doubt in anybody's mind why while the new ambassador took the time off to visit the constituency and have this meeting with me. It was being planned for the last 6 months. It was supposed to be held sometime in August, and it went to September, to October, to November. Time and time schedules keep conflicting. And this window in February opened, and the ambassador joined, and she dived straight in. And that's how she ended up in Mayaro on that fateful Monday morning. Right,
and there are some touch points there that we will get to. I imagine that what you painted there was a sufficiency of background for what led to her visit. We will talk about energy and energy security issues and enhanced collaboration with Mayaro on reinforcing the commitment to engaging local authorities and so on. And the other interesting thing about it, it was happening at the same time that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and his team were in the United States holding talks, well, country to country as well.
That was pure coincidental. As I said, this visit was scheduled since last year. And because of her scheduling and my scheduling, there was no sweet spot last year. So it was just pure coincidence that, there was the meeting in Washington with the Prime Minister the week before. And as soon as she came back on Friday, pure coincidence that the window for the following Monday had opened. And that we had about a week in advance to start the planning, which we did pretty hurriedly because we didn't want to miss her. We didn't want to miss this opportunity to have Ambassador Bond in Mayaro. But it was purely coincidental that all these meetings at very, very high level with the Prime Minister would have happened the week before.
All right, so let's get to two of the hot point issues here. Yeah. Her interest in addressing the issues of both human trafficking and and drug trafficking. To what extent, what is the evidence about how this is an issue in the area and for the people in Mayaro? Both of them, yeah.
Sure. So two things we must remember. And Ambassador Bond made it very, very clear that her government has a zero tolerance approach in terms of narco trafficking and human trafficking. Now, while she was here at the regional corporation, we had the first meeting and welcome arrangement at the regional corporation. In attendance were all the councillors, all the men, we had members of the TTPS and so on was there. And she raised the matter on whether the constituency had that issue of the narco trafficking, obviously because of our coastal borders, and whether the human trafficking, more specifically from the point of the Venezuelans coming into the island and ending up in this whole issue of human trafficking, if that was a big issue for us here in the constituency. The TTPS did have the conversation with her. We did have a senior superintendent and the inspector for the region there, and they addressed that matter with her. A lot of information was shared in terms of some of the strategies that they were employing. And then obviously the ambassador made the point that, her government is engaging Trinidad and Tobago as a country in terms of whatever support that is required at a national level for the Coast Guard, for the Defense Force, for the Ministry of National Security, that they were doing it at a very high level. But she wanted to find out if there were any peculiar things that we may need in the constituency here, taking into consideration the fact that we have a 17-mile coastal border. We do house the largest energy supply in the country, so we do have energy assets here. And obviously, whether the TTPS would have needed any type of assistance specifically for us here in Mayaro. And some conversations were had between the officers of the TTPS and the ambassador in terms of addressing that. So that is where the context of having this conversation around narco trafficking and human trafficking came about in our discussions.
Yeah, so that there is a sense, if not detailed in a way that some people may ask, that Mayaro and the front, the ocean fronts along the constituency, that is a point, that is a pressure point for human trafficking and drug trafficking. There's information that sustains that and supports that?
I don't think that it's heavily used. I don't think our eastern seaboard here is heavily used for either. There is evidence of some narco trafficking. There is evidence of some landing of Venezuelan nationals illegally on some points along the coastline. I do not believe, I have no evidence, I have no information to say that it is as prevalent or as intensified as what happens on the southwestern peninsula. If you would recall, just recently, we had about $100 million worth of cocaine washed up on shore right beyond the BPTT compound at Isthmus Point. Apparently, there was some vessel that may have overturned with the narcotics and it washed up along the shore. That event created quite a stir within the security services. A lot of rumors were peddling. I think there were 1 or 2 killings coming out of that, based on who would have received the drugs. I would have heard about people storming people's homes in the night based on rumors that who collected 1 block of the cocaine and so on. So to say that we do not have an issue in terms of the narco trafficking, I will not say it is not an issue. It is an issue because we had a recent issue on it. But as I said, it was raised as a matter in terms of the general conversation and perhaps how in the future, perhaps this year, there may be things that we can ask the U.S. Embassy for specifically that can address issues in Mayaro here. And she was very well open to hearing about some of that. And perhaps we will issue some correspondence for her in the future when I have further talks with the TTPS officers here in the Sandy Grande Mayaro region, which is the headquarters for this Mayaro Rio Claro area.
Yeah, you say maybe, but I suppose I mean, probably just being modest, but one suspects that there are tangible, sort of hard core things or had information, if not evidence, as to why this is an issue that will make for serious involvement and assistance?
Well, I don't think the ambassador came to Mayaro unprepared. I do believe that her political office unit would have briefed her on the constituency, the nuances of the constituency. Remember, they may have access to information that even I, as the MP, may not have, because, you know, at a very high level, especially dealing with the issues of crime and criminality, because, you know, right now, we are under a third-tier watch list from the U.S. government in terms of crime and criminality. So absolutely, the ambassador would have been updated. And as I said, there are certain things that we would have discussed in private that, you know, I would not want to talk about on national television. But definitely, there is a concern from her perspective in terms of the crime and criminality throughout the country. And if there was an opportunity for the U.S. Embassy's involvement in peculiar items here in the Mayaro constituency, they would have been all ready and willing to listen and see where we can lend some support. If I can give you an example, one of the issues that I raised with her in terms of our massive flooding issue, we wanted to find out if there was a possibility of the donation of one of those huge army trucks that can be used to traverse the waters whenever we have communities like Kernaham and so on cut off from the rest of Mayaro for 3 or 4 days while the water subsides. That was one thing that she seemed very interested in looking at to see if there was one that may be carded for disposal in the U.S. that can be refurbished and brought to Trinidad and perhaps donated to our disaster management unit right here in Mayaro, Rio Claro. So those were the kind of things that we really engaged in terms of specifics for Mayaro, Rio Claro in the discussion.
Yeah, so to find a kind of suitable refrain for this. There was much more than a fishing expedition.
Yeah. It definitely was not a fishing expedition. You know, we used the opportunity. The chairman of the regional corporation, Raymond Coze, he had a good 15-minute explanation of challenges within the constituency, issues around the energy sector and labor requirements, infrastructural issues. All of these matters were raised. Obviously, some of them will not fall in the purview of what the embassy can assist with. But nonetheless, the ambassador was given a first-hand explanation, and I dare say a first-hand look, because she drove down our roads and she would have seen the condition of the Naparima Mayaro Road and the relevant landslips and so on that are there. So it would have tied into her own experience coming to Mayaro. So a picture was painted in terms of the challenges we face. And what we hoped at the end of the visit, that we were able to open some doors in the mind of the ambassador. So as we engage the embassy going forward, during this year, she would have had a first-hand knowledge of the constituency, hear from the stakeholders, and be more affable to whatever requests we may make going forward in 2024.
Yeah, energy and security as well, and that's a big item.
Well, specifically on the matter of energy, we raised the issue based on labor. It was connected more to labor in the Mayaro constituency. So there have always been 2 areas of high concentration of labor in the constituency. It's either you were part and parcel of the energy sector through the work that happened in Galeota, and on the other side of it, you would have had the casual labor system out of local government through the regional corporation. Now, over the years, the last 4 years, as the energy sector started to contract and these services companies started to act in a different manner, the labor absorption in the energy sector started to reduce. So the demand for labor from the regional corporation started to increase. So the point that we raised, well, the ambassador, when I had the one-on-one with her, she asked, well, you know, what would have caused that? And I explained to her the shrinkage of the investment in the energy sector here in Galeota, but more so the practice of how contracts were now being awarded by the multinational companies. and we engaged some information on what I felt these energy companies, these multinational companies, would have changed in how contracts were awarded, thereby reducing the input of local labor here. And I'll give you a quick example. The national unemployment statistic for Trinidad and Tobago is about 4% according to the CSO. But for Mayaro, as a constituency, the unemployment rate is 14.5%. Now, that is a huge jump. I mean, you're talking about 10 points from the national average. And as the chairman of the corporation raised that matter, she further engaged me when we had our one-on-one on what's happening there. Because, you know, in her mind, if you have high unemployment, the issues of crime, criminality, drugs, drug use, social issues, all these things end up, you know, snowballing on you. So I think that was the nature of what the discussion was in terms of energy and energy matters, more specifically on how the labor force was being impacted and how, you know, we do have this new Manatee field that is being explored by Shell. That could well be a $20 billion US project that is coming down our heels. The point that I had made to the ambassador, if we don't address how our production sharing contracts are managed to ensure that local communities benefit from the most amount of labor, then we will continue having these problems. Well, so that was the nature, Andy, of how we engaged that conversation.
Yeah, because I just want to extend that a little bit, because in my earlier decades as a reporter, when it was Amoco and there was a man named Frank Allen, God rest his soul, he was in charge of corporate communications at the time. And so he afforded me great access into the operations of when it was Amoco, and several times we went down there when they were towing the rigs offshore and so on. And I came to understand that, in fact, at that time, there was a kind of commitment that the company had as to employment, absorbing employment from in the area first, to give some priority to that. So say there's been some shifting in that, what you're saying, in the sand there?
So there has been a change in the way that contracts have been awarded over the last couple of years. So for instance, 5 years ago, if there was a general maintenance contract to be awarded, 5 or 6 of the local energy services company may have gotten pieces of the contract. And obviously the local guys would hire local people. So you'd have your skilled labor, semi-skilled labor, and your scab labor all coming from within the community. Now, over the last couple of years, due to globalization and so on, and I think, you know, a lot of global contracts are being awarded, you find that single source companies are now preferred. So you would have now a single source provider getting the contract. And what the single source provider would do, they may look at the local guys and pick off the key element in terms of their technical professional labor team, bring them on board to give the impression that you are taking local labor as part of the contract requirements, but 80% of the labor force comes from outside of Mayaro. So you do find that now we have a huge unemployment of our low-skilled, semi-skilled, medium-skilled professionals here in Mayaro because of that formula. Now, if you look at the production sharing contracts, the production sharing contracts have specific reference to labor in terms of sourcing local labor. But there is no specific, it is a bit gray in terms of how much, right? So what I have asked in all of the meetings that I have met with Shell and BP to an extent is that please, when these contracts are being, you know, put out for bid and tender, writing into the contracts, whether it is 60%, 70%, 80% local labor from within the community, and then anything outside of that, I mean, all fine. If you can't find the skill here in Mayaro, well, by all means, go Princestown, San Fernando, Port of Spain, and get it. So, you know, I have to enforce, and this is something as MP that I will be enforcing in all my conversations going forward, that, you know, as long as there is an opportunity for things to happen here in Mayaro, it must be given preference, because the blood, the lifeline of this country, 20% of GDP comes from Mayaro in terms of the gas that comes out of Point Galeota. So Mayaro should not have the worst roads. Mayaro should not have water issues. Mayaro should not have 200 landslips because 20% of GDP comes from Mayaro. And that's something that I'll be pressing heavily on as conversations with the multinational companies continue in terms of the exploration of oil and gas coming out of our East Coast basin here.
And to what extent it requires even sort of more deftness as an MP, I said DEFT as opposed to DEF, as an MP on addressing issues like these, because at the end of the day, that's your bread and butter in terms of being MP. You have to be seen to be representing the constituents
absolutely. But one must also be cautious and mature in the conversation as well. Mayaro's lifeline is the energy sector. We do have a few offshoots in terms of our tourism assets, agriculture, and so on. But it accounts for a very small portion of our productive capacity here in Mayaro. But we must also be mindful that we cannot engage our multinational partners in a hostile manner, in a manner that threatens the efficiency of the work that has to be done. So I have always taken the approach. Now, I do not support, for one day, any shutting down of any operation. I do not support blocking of road, burning of tires, and so on, to prove a point. I believe in engaging the multinationals at a boardroom level, where the interests of the people, we have a few unemployment agencies that are very, very vocal, whom I give a lot of support to, in terms of insisting that the people of Mayaro, they are the first choice when looking at employment in any of these projects. So I take a very mature approach to it. I engage them, very, very quietly when matters raise. I take one or two stakeholders to the meeting, and we have these very, very mature discussions, rather than, creating, in our local terms, bacchanal, which I don't feel that we make any headway when we go down that route. So as MP, I continue to engage them in terms of making sure that whatever happens, more so for this Manatee project that is coming, which will be a huge investment in Trinidad and Tobago and a lot of work here in Mayaro, I will be looking very, very closely as to how they are looking at the production sharing contracts and their responsibility to the community going forward.
Yeah, and how does that put you in relation to, let's say, the more radical types on the labor side?
Well, I can't stop the radicals. I will engage one or two of the presidents from time to time. I have made my position clear, right? As an MP, I am also a businessman. I also work in the energy sector as well. I am pro-business. My preference is to work on the problem without stopping the work, right? Because every time we shut down the operation, taxpayers lose money. Every time there is a stop of production in any business, taxpayers lose money. So I have engaged. I know some of the presidents personally. We talk from time to time. They will do what they have to do within their mandate. And as MP, I will continue to do what I have to do with the mandate that I have as a legislator here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, believe it or not, we have to go. But let me just ask you to wrap it up by looking through the glass, as they say, because you see the fruit of what we're talking about here now up ahead.
Yeah, well, definitely we will continue to liaise with the embassy. I have a specific requirement in terms of looking for some assistance, primarily in the area of the disaster response, disaster management. You know, we are a flood-prone constituency. Flood-prone. We have 5 areas that comes under heavy flooding. We want to ask for some support for our disaster management unit in terms of training, communications, some tools and equipment as well. So that's primarily on my list. Secondly, in terms of looking for some support for our police officers, we do have challenges here in terms of transportation, equipment, tools. If there are things that can be offered to our security officers here to help, improve their quality of service, by all means, we'll do it. One major thing that I have engaged the ambassador is support for our fisher folks here. We do have from time to time fishing vessels with people being lost. We've lost some lives just, last year.
Yes.
How can the U.S. Coast Guard help us in tooling some of these fishing vessels with low-cost GPS equipment, training for fishermen in survival, 4-day or 5-day survival skill until you are found, and any other opportunity that will, strengthen our fisher folks here. So we do have quite a few things earmarked for this year to engage the U.S. Embassy, and I have every belief that they will lend as much support as they can within their own internal budgets.
Mr. Parry, thank you very much for talking with us on this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Rushton Parry, the Member of Parliament for Mayaro, talking about fruit that is to be born from increased and closer relations with the U.S. Ambassador in Trinidad and Tobago, Candice Bond. This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
WESN.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to himself. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have 2 of the 3 species of anteaters right here.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person,